Chap Hanley, the Vice President and General Manager of Atlantic Broadband's Connecticut Systems. And it's my pleasure today to introduce the moderator, Trevor Arp. And Trevor will guide us through a conversation on technology and its impact on how we market. So Trevor Arp serves as Vice President and Product Manager for Comcast Northeast Division. Got more than 20 years of marketing, sales, and product management experience. Trevor's got a rich background in managing the go-to market strategy for new products and services. In his current role, Trevor has broad and diverse responsibilities, leading all aspects of strategy for voice, video, data, mobile, and home security products within the Comcast Northeast Division, including multiple platform content distribution, new product deployment, broadcaster relations, and network capacity management. In other words, Trevor wears a lot of hats.
Yeah.
And he does it well. And so it's my pleasure to let Trevor introduce the panel and then guide us for the next hour or so. Thanks.
Thanks, Chap, and thank you all for coming. I've had the good fortune of being part of this panel for the past few years, and every year we've got a talented group of industry leaders. This year is no exception. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun over the next 45 minutes. You know, I'm holding my notes, and all I can think in the back of my head is, you know, the Mark Zuckerberg testifying in front of Congress, and they could read his notes and Trump, where it says, "Be human." You know, so I'm not going to show you my notes. The topic we chose today, Chap referenced, is all around technology and its impacts on marketing. And that's intentionally a very broad subject. The point is that's going to allow us to go wherever the room wants to take this. We can talk about it through the lens of the marketer, or we can talk about it through the lens of the consumer. And I'll do intros in a second of the panel, but the panel has a tremendous amount of experience, but also very different job functions. So it should make this a really interesting discussion. So just by a quick show of hands, is it anyone's first NECTA? Oh, we got a few. Nice, that's actually impressive. So the rest of you know the drill. For those who are new, here's how it works, which is we could basically have two main goals with our marketing panel every year. The first is hopefully to entertain you and maybe have you walk out of here with a nugget or two that you can apply when you get back to your day job. The second is not to do anything to get anyone fired. So we are going to be very thoughtful in what we talk about and not talk about. Because here's the reality, as you all know, we live in crazy days right now in our industry. And whether you think about that through the rate of innovation, you know, if you think about it, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, 3D, 4K, streaming, voice control, you name it, you can go on and on. Or you think about it through the competitive lens, it's crazy. And what we can't do is get into our respective deep strategies. But what my hope is that through guiding this conversation, you'll get a sense of how some of the smartest people in the industry approach the challenges. So that's the main goal. So here's the flow. So I'm going to read some quick bios. I shortened them all because you guys are all impressive and have exceptionally long bios. I'm going to start with some structured questions, and then we'll save a little time at the end for Q&A. But our goal is to end on time. But this gets fun when the crowd gets involved, and it gets fun when the panelists play off each other. So feel free to interrupt each other, disagree with each other, throw out opposing points of view, and to the extent the crowd wants to get engaged, by all means, please do so. So with that, I'm going to start. I'm just going to go in order of my notes. So Chris Defendis. So Chris has been with HBO since 2001 and was most recently promoted to Vice President, Domestic Network Distribution in May of 2015. He currently oversees the Comcast account. In his role, Chris and team are responsible for growing the HBO and Cinemax subbase within the Comcast footprint, increasing customer engagement of both brands on Comcast platforms. Chris graduated with a degree in management from the University of Dayton in 2000 and received his MBA from DePaul University's Kelstad School of Business in 2007. Currently lives in Indianapolis, Indiana with his wife, 2 kids, son Cade, age 10, daughter Harper, age 8, and a crazy golden doodle, Vera. How old is the golden doodle?
Good.
How old is she?
She is 4.
4. I got a 1-year-old golden retriever who's equally crazy. All right. Chris also serves on the board of Westfield Youth Sports, Inc., a nonprofit community-based organizer of youth sports in Westfield, Indiana, with a focus on using athletics to help develop life skills in school-age children. So thanks for joining us, Chris. Brian Fernie, to my left here. Brian serves as Vice President of Marketing and Sales for Comcast Western New England region, which serves customers in more than 300 communities in Connecticut, Western Mass, Western New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York. In his role, he develops strategies to maximize market share for all product lines and provides strategic direction on new product launches and marketing plans for all sales channels. Brian has over 19 years of experience in the cable industry and has worked in sales and marketing for the past 14 years. Prior to his current role, he was a director of marketing for Comcast, where he was responsible for delivering strategic planning and execution. Brian has won multiple national marketing awards for his creative development and strategy.
Word.
Yeah, boom. In addition, he sits on the board of CineStudio, a nonprofit movie theater in Hartford, Connecticut, and volunteers as a set builder for our youth theater productions in West Hartford, Connecticut. He lives in West Hartford with his wife Jenny, daughter Nona, and dog Vinny.
Dr. Vinny Boombats.
All righty. Next, we have Mark Kang, all the way at the end. Mark serves as Senior Vice President of Worldwide Distribution at INSP, a leading family-friendly cable TV network with over 80 million subscribers. Prior to INSP, he served as Senior Vice President of Affiliate Relations at Sportsman Channel, now part of the Outdoor Sportsman Group, and led their content distribution and affiliate marketing efforts. Mark began his career in finance at Morgan Stanley, had a variety of roles in that industry, but most interestingly had a brief stint as a talent agent at International Artist Agency specializing in Grammy award-winning hip-hop artists. I feel like there are some good stories in there. So, Mark, too, has received several recognitions and serves on various industry boards, including Cablefax's Top 100 Executives, Top Minorities in Cable, Rising Stars of Cable TV Executives, Top Affiliate Team, and the list goes on. So thank you, Mark. And last but not least, we have Jeff Abbey.
Can we shorten mine a
Yeah,
lot?
you want to shorten this thing?
Jeff's super cool.
All right, Jeff.
I think I can basically say,
Yeah, you want to do yourself?
been in the industry a long time,
Right.
and unlike them, I have not won any recognition or awards. So
You and me both.
I'm the mediocre one up here.
We'll
Always
get
the
you one
pride,
before the
always
night's
the
over.
pride.
How about that?
All right, so let's dive in.
Thank you. I like that.
You want more? I can give you more. All right.
I'm good.
Jeff will buy you a beer later and tell you all about himself. All right, so we're going to start with an easy question just to get the juices flowing. I'm going to go down the line. I'll start with Brian. So this is not specific to the cable industry and not specific to your job. I'm just interested in what technology enhancement, what gadget, what fun toy are you playing with these days? What's your favorite and why?
Favorite new piece of technology is the Callaway Rogue system of jailbreak and how they design their new heads. Thank you, Russell. Harder
someone else
metals,
has heard of it.
lighter.
This is
Picked
golf.
up 10 yards in
This
distance.
is golf.
Huge,
Yes, okay.
yes.
All right.
Yeah,
All right.
love that new thing.
Jeff?
So unlike many of you, I find technology both invigorating and sometimes aggravating. So I am actually on about a 4-month hiatus of ingesting any new technology until I can figure out how to get my Sonos speaker to work in my kitchen.
Nice.
Good goal.
We're gonna get Jeff playing Fortnite soon. Yeah. Chris?
All right, so this is going to sound like I'm totally sucking up, but I'm not. We just moved about 3 weeks ago into a Comcast market, so now I have X1. And it is, it's life-changing for 2 kids, 10 and 7, who one is a 10-year-old boy who's into Cartoon Network sports and Fortnite, and the other is a 7-year-old daughter who's into watching weird YouTube videos of kids opening toys that they don't know about. And to have that on one platform where I don't have to go in there every 10 minutes to switch it up is honestly life-changing, and especially for a wife who doesn't remember ever what channel anything is on. For her to just to say something into the voice remote makes my life so much easier.
Well, I'm trying to suck up, but unfortunately, I don't live in the Comcast region, so I can't say I have the X1 technology. But my favorite technology that I'm using right now is Spotify with Sonos. It's incredible. Just went through a whole renovation, so we're able to wire all the Sonos speakers on it, and we enjoy that very much.
Awesome. All right.
I can't
well,
wait.
I could come and help you. Happy to do it.
All right, well, we're going to stick with Mark for a second. So if you look at the 5 of us, one of us is clearly way hipper than the rest. That would be you, Mark. So you live in New York, and you're unbelievably dapperly dressed. So
hey,
You guys all look great too.
But you guys have better socks than I do.
Actually,
for sure.
You know, this is an annual tradition at the marketing panel here where people reveal their socks. And I think what I've noticed that we fit into two buckets. You've got the people who are semi-cool, that would be Chris and Jeff and myself. And then you've got two really progressive people. Are you even wearing socks? You guys are wearing like
I
no-show
am.
socks?
I mean, actually, my boss is here, so I definitely have to wear some kind of socks. But, yeah.
The new trend.
Formal attire
Just
today.
when I thought we were getting cool and everything changes, but all right. So Mark, obviously you got a lot going on. You got a family. You live in New York City, the city that never sleeps. You got a big job, and you're in an industry where everything is changing around you every single day. I'm interested in just kind of what's your strategy? How do you stay up and just stay connected to what's next and figure out how to make sure that technology doesn't pass you by?
Yeah, I think with all these technology, new and old, there's just so many of it, and it's hard to keep up with it. And I know I observe my kids, what they use, my wife, but I know we're not the only ones that's using technology, so I do a lot of reading in terms of what's out there and what catches my interest. And I do a lot of app downloading, and I read a statistic that says that in average, people eliminate 25% of their apps as soon as they download it, once they use it. So, you know, initially it's interesting, but I think once you use it, you realize if it's going to stick with you, and if it's time saver. For me, it's all about technology, about time saving and how to effectively use your time. And if it does not do that for me, then I pretty much eliminate it. So it's about what I'm interested in and going with what I think it's going to help me in the long run.
Interesting. Jeff, I'm interested in your take on the same question, because you kind of introduce yourself as maybe somewhat of a laggard as it relates to technology. What do you do in terms of, you know, understanding it's not your primary focus, but what do you do to ensure that you're at least following the trends?
I guess I would recharacterize it. I don't consider myself so much a laggard as I do just kind of stupid. I can't figure this stuff out. So I try pretty quickly, but I fail fast. You know, I was thinking about this, and I think there's two things that I would offer to the group, and it really wasn't even that transparent to me until I thought about the question. And one of them is everybody should have a technology Sherpa, someone who can lead you through life and teach you things, someone who's smarter than you on it. We've got someone on our team named Scott Sandel who is just absolutely brilliant. He's the kind of guy, literally one day, he worked Newtonian physics into a discussion about business. And it left half of us scrambling for Google to figure out what the heck is Newtonian physics, and the other half saying, Scott, can you please give us an analogy that makes more sense? And I also learned to respect that group too. To don't be afraid to make yourself vulnerable and ask a question when you don't understand something about technology. And it's a funny story, but it reminds me of a guy, we hired an engineer from AT&T years ago before they were really into what we do. And he was a brilliant engineer, and we're in a meeting where we were talking about qualms. I don't know if anybody knows what they are. I still don't know what they are, but this guy goes, so tell me just two things. What is a qualm, and can I touch one? And it was just such a fundamental question of, is it something physical or is it logical software? And it just made me realize even the brightest, smartest technologists have to open up and ask a question when you don't understand. So just be vulnerable on it.
I think that's great advice. Yep. Brian or Chris, I don't know, anything you want to add?
no, that's good.
That's a good
Great
answer.
example.
Well done. All right, so I'm going to ask the same question of all of you now, and then I want to go a little deeper, Mark, with you and Chris. But I think this question is going to be interesting because your jobs are all so different. But I'm just interested in you guys all sharing maybe one example of something you've done recently where you've leveraged a capability, a new enhancement, some sort of new technology. And whether it's worked or not worked, I'm a big believer that sometimes you learn more through failure than you do through success. But either way, trying something new and kind of how it impacted the business. And maybe we'll just go down the line, start with you, Brian.
Sure. You know, I think when we talk about new technology, we get kind of enamored with the shiny objects of the new phones and the things we can push buttons. But I think in a lot of ways, the things that help our jobs, that's new technology, is about how do we mine data and use that to make better decisions. That I can think about when I first started in the industry, I was on the programming side, but my first operator job was with Time Warner, and I ran pay-per-view. And I remember wanting to really understand what really moved the needle from a tactical standpoint. So I would just do things like, well, at WrestleMania 4, we did these tactics and made this much money. So in WrestleMania 5, I'm just going to stop doing newspaper, see what happens. And then you go, oh, all right, it didn't change. I guess I can save that money and put it over here. Whereas now we have such intelligent tools from a mixed media modeling standpoint that if we have an extra incremental dollar to drive units, we can really look and say, well, what kind of unit you're trying to drive, and let that data and that technology help make the decision, as opposed to me just sort of going, I think this will work. That you have real hard data that you can make a really intelligent decision and be a good steward of the business and get a good ROI.
That's great. Jeff?
So similar thing, we've got a technology now, it's new to me anyway, it may not be to everybody, but when we do events and sponsorships, we have a unit that we'll bring out, it's on wheels, it's a virtual reality, very cool thing that we take to some of our major events. And the cool part, to me, is not even the VR part. That's fun, customers enjoy it, but we actually have a camera or multiple cameras embedded in this unit, and it's scanning the crowd, and it counts the number of passers-by, people staring at it, how long do they linger and look at it, and then we're beginning to learn how to use that to compare to some of the statistics like how long do people watch a YouTube video when we buy a digital video ad, and how does this compare to it. So right now it's still in the infancy stage for us, but it's just very cool to have this data that really helps us rather than someone sitting there and clicking how many people walked in or talked to us.
That's intriguing.
I'd go in a little bit of a different direction in terms of team productivity. As Trevor mentioned, I live in Indy. I have some of my team in New York, some of my team in Detroit, some of my team out west. So we're not in the same office. So keeping things organized, productive, be on the same page. We're using new tools. Again, I think part of the whole thing about keeping up with technology trends too is there's a lot of noise. You hear about a lot of new tools, you test a lot of new tools all the time. So, we're kind of constantly, exploring new tools as an organization, as a team. So, we currently use an app called Asana, Slack, which everyone knows, and just start to use those things and get away from kind of the monotony of, Outlook or Excel or Word documents, but do things that are more collaborative and allow us to really connect as a team when we are remote and we travel quite a bit. So I think, we're not shy to try new things, but also are honest when we're saying, okay, this didn't work. Let's go in a different direction here or there. So I think that's one of the ways that we're using technology to better the effectiveness of the teams.
Yeah, for INSP, I would say that data mining is a big thing for us. We really dig into our research, and what coincidentally found out was that as we were observing our viewers, a lot of our audience the biggest show they watch is actually WWE. So that was sort of a surprise for us. And as we dug deeper into it, we started to analyze in terms of what type of shows they would like to do. And it's not only the WWE show itself, but it's actually good prevails over evil. That was sort of the concept, which also falls into the Western genre, which has been a big hit for us. And from that, I think it's all about just getting deeper into the truth of what that really is. And once we started doing that pathway of research, our originals came up from that, and a lot of our shows and programming is aligned with that sort of concept of good prevails over evil, and wholesome entertainment. And so we've been luckily experiencing really good ratings, and we've been going up consistently.
Yeah, that is intriguing to me. And that's kind of where I wanted to go with my next question. And this is specific to you and Chris. So you guys are on the content side, and from the cable side, often we put programmers all in the same box, but programmers are obviously very, very different. Premium business model versus broader distribution from a tier standpoint, Mark. Different demos. I'm interested, Chris, in your, ultimately at the end of the day, ratings drive your success, and INSP's had tremendous growth. You guys are, top 25 network now, yeah. Which is congratulations.
Thank you.
And HBO has always been progressive and an industry leader in pretty much everything you guys do. But you're talking, at least in theory, and maybe not, to very different segments of the audience. And I'm interested in how different your answers are in terms of the approach to how you drive the kind of ratings you do from a technology standpoint. So you kind of teed it up, Mark, with some of your analysis. Chris, I don't know if you want to elaborate or at all, but Chris, I'm interested in anything you might know about how HBO does the same thing
Well, we don't necessarily look, I think we've pivoted a little bit with on-demand, that we aren't necessarily tied to ratings like other networks, obviously, with the ad model. I think we are, linear viewing still drives a good percentage of viewership for us, but that number is steadily declining, and it really, is distributor specific, depending on, the platform and the investment they've made in on-demand. So I would say that we're less interested or invested in, who's tuning in on Sunday at 10, and more about, what does that engagement look like week over week. Yes, you're going to have the bigger titles, the Westworlds, the Game of Thrones, things like that, but we're really kind of trying to, sell the value proposition of the catalog, and it's amazing that still, Game of Thrones season 1, episode 1 is always in a top 5 viewed titles. Sopranos, The Wire, Entourage are still in the top 5 titles, or top 10 titles, top 15 titles. So we're really selling the value of the subscription and not necessarily driving to Sunday at 10 o'clock like we've done in the past.
Yeah.
And I think as the industry progresses and and it evolves, I think it's going to be less about what is on the linear network and more about what is on demand, and kind of meet the consumer where they want to be met.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and it's interesting. You said something in the upfront about the voice control remote, and I'm interested in your reaction, because in my house, it's intriguing to watch how kids use it versus how I tune to TV. And my son, who's a sports fanatic, watches ESPN every single day, has no idea what channel number ESPN is.
Yeah.
And I'm interested, and I'll open this up to the group, because I'm interested in, through the eyes of a programmer, when a user is more interested in the content than the brand the content is attached to. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is that scary? Or is that just the way it is, and I don't know how to think about that.
I think I think to some it's scary, to others it's not. I think the brand of HBO naturally gets a lot of credit for things that they did. We've all been in conversations where like, oh, Billions, I love Billions on HBO. It's like, no, it's not ours, but, we'll take credit for it. So I think it really depends. It does afford us some things, but it's interesting. One of the, I heard this from somebody at Comcast one time that said the voice remote actually had an unintended consequence of diminishing the amount of surfing that people do, because they don't go into the guide to look, they just go directly to the title that they're looking for. And I think for some networks that's good. For other networks, it's probably not so good, because that search and discovery, isn't, people don't stumble upon the titles like they would. So.
Yeah, I'm just going back to what you were saying in terms of us using technology. I think the approach that we've been taking is that there's a lot of noise, as Chris mentioned. There's a lot of noise, and I think it's more important for us to kind of see what really sticks and what really works. And that's where I think we've been successful, even on the OTT front, or whether, jumping on things early. We don't have enough data to make a definitive conclusion on whether it's going to succeed or not. So we've been on that pathway, and it's been really clicking. And then, I think also some of the things that we've been doing well on the social media front, even on Facebook, we know that's where our audience go. So in fact, we now have 2.3 million followers, which is higher than even USA or some of these big networks or TBS. And that's because you just have to know where your audience is, and using and leveraging technology to follow that, and being committed to that type of approach is, I think, it's an important one.
Great. So Jeff, I want to pivot over to you. So you oversee field marketing for Cox. And I'm interested in, from a technology, you gave a great example around how you're leveraging technology, but one school of thought could argue that all these tools are wonderful enhancements, and they help you do your job better. Another school of thought that could argue that it's just too much, and at some point the complexity doesn't warrant the investment. How do you think about that, and at what point do you lean in and embrace it versus when you have a bias towards the old tried and true way of doing things?
That's a great question. I think that a couple of years ago I read this great, I think it was a Harvard Business Review. If it's not, I'm going to say it was, so I look smart. But it was someone from the...
It was HBO.
I saw it on Billions. Great show you guys have. But this person wrote something about marketers would do better to obsessively focus on their consumer rather than their competitor. And I think the same thing can be said if you just substitute consumer rather than technology. Technology absolutely has a role in marketing, whether it's the speed with which we can produce an ad and distribute it digitally, or respond to a consumer complaint on social media, or do deep analytics to find the most profitable customers and get the right product promoted to them at the right price point. There's room for all of that, but in the end, I think just always stepping back and asking yourself the question, what business or consumer problem does this solve? And is it a technology solution, or is it a people, process, or some other type of problem?
Yeah.
So I think that's our Rosetta Stone, that's our touchstone of always go back and ask, what does it do to the consumer, and what are we trying to solve?
You know, if you don't mind, it reminds me a lot, and I think it ties into something Chris said a minute ago, that I was reading recently that in healthcare, they're getting into artificial intelligence to diagnose diseases. That AI is way better than the best doctor will ever be, because you're looking at a list of things and saying, what's this, what's that, what does it get to? And so it starts to change what a doctor is in the future, what the skill set is. It has nothing to do with having this ability to memorize and act like a computer. Computers can be better at it. What your job as a doctor is to be more human and to be empathetic and have an emotional intelligence. And so I think it starts to change what a marketer is going forward too, because you have all these tools and all this intelligence that it starts to become less about, I know my market, as opposed to, let's talk to people and hear how we can take this to connect to them. And again, as you said, using technology to connect people you work with as well. That's what I think is the advantage of all this technology, of how it comes together to get more one-to-one, as opposed to just shooting it out the window and hoping for the best.
Right, and I think to that point, I mean, we're looking at competition as if it's content competition or distribution, but we're really competing with time. I mean, you got 24 hours a day, 8 hours, actually 10 hours for working, because my boss is here, but 8 hours of work time, you know, 8 hours, depending if you have kids, for sleep, right? And the rest of the time, what's that going on in terms of how are you using that time? So as much as people love to watch TV and content, I mean, you're up against social media, you're up against what other habits, hopefully you're spending time with your family. And sort of our goal is to try to put family and time together for entertainment so that you could spend it together to synergize that time. So, you know, I think we have to broaden our perspective in terms of how and who our competition really is. And sometimes we tend to bark to the wrong tree.
I think that's an intriguing point. And so my question back to you is, what's more important? Is it to grow your share of time, or to make the time you have more impactful?
And definition of impactful, you know? Yeah.
Meaning, I'm just, you know, and it's a question I would love for you guys to react to it, but I mean, would you rather have the consumer engaging with you more hours of the day, or the same number of hours a day and make those hours of engagement more pleasurable?
I would say that. I can tell you an example. My daughter has this internship thing right now, and so I got to go pick her up at 11:30 at night at a theater. So typically, and I don't want to be there, I got to be ready to get her. So I sit in the car for about a half hour to make sure. Our Stream app is so important to me right now, because I'm sitting in the car and I can still keep up on things and not just stare at the windshield. So that's like hearts and minds, like, oh, this is saving me. This is giving me something to have a better experience while sitting outside of a theater at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. So yeah, I think giving that thing that really makes it feel like this is mine and I'm connected is so important.
And I would say, I think the latter leads to the former. I mean, think about what Mark said, 25% of apps are downloaded after immediately using. That did not add much value to the consumer, and they deleted it.
Right.
If you give someone something that is so engaging, they're willing to invest their limited amount of time in it, then whether you launch a brand extension or a new improvement, they're more likely to try that as well, and you may get both.
Yeah. So Brian, question for you. So Brian and I work together, and for any Comcasters in the room, you know that we have access to tools and data and analytics like we've never had before. And it's all wonderful information, but back to the only so many hours in the day, how do you process what information and tools and capabilities you want to vigorously support and leverage versus which ones you just as a function of reality, need to push off to the side?
I wish there was I had a better answer other than it almost feels like cereal. Like you're going to try it, and if you go, and you move on. Whereas if you get that little spark, you go, ooh, I like the Lucky Charms, that you're going to keep coming back to it. I mean, especially in our role, so we have marketing and sales, and so there's just lots of data you can look at in your sales channels, and you can scan through it and kind of go, eh. Whereas there's other ones you get into and you can find yourself like, where did those 3 hours go? And now you start to go, wow, this held my attention. In some ways, I think it's like video content. Does the data hold your attention and help you make a better decision? Then you keep going. And I think accuracy is a big part of that. That there's sometimes you get reports or there's tools that we can use that you feel like, wow, that really made a difference. We used that, we grew this, and you can see results. You're going to keep going back. As some others you'll look at and you try out and you go, I don't know that was any better than just doing it the way we always did. So you kind of move on and try something else. So I think it's that almost taste test.
Yeah, I want to open that up for the rest of the group too. I mean, are you guys as bombarded with analytics and capabilities as we are? And if so, how do you guys process that?
I'm not. I'm not part of. I know there's different parts of the company that look at different aspects of the data. I think we don't have as much as I think we'd like. But I think you can get overwhelmed by it, right? I mean, to Brian's point, I think with data, a lot of it is trial and error. Like you don't really know if the data is valuable until you're really kind of far into it sometimes, and then it could be just a big waste of time. So I think that sometimes plays into it. And I think one of the things our CEO says a lot of times, and I think it does relate to data because you can get overwhelmed by it, is the main thing is to keep the main thing, right? So don't get distracted by all sorts of these data points that can be flying in from all over the place, when in reality, a lot of it doesn't matter. It's probably good to know, but don't let it distract you from what your overarching goals are.
I mean, for us, I think we just have to be careful in terms of how we see the data and read the fine print. Because I mean, Trevor, you're on the distribution in terms of subscribers, and any networks could come into your office and basically say they're number one in something if they chop it right. So I think when you take a look at that and say, okay, you're number one in something, but anyone can be number one in something. So I think there's a lot of hype behind it. And you hear about a lot of fake news, but fake data is put together to create fake news. And we just have to be careful and make sure that we look at and analyze it and understand it and be able to ask the right questions.
And if you guys want to share any of the data that you have, feel free. Send it our way.
You might not want to see it. Kidding, of course. So let's take a break. We got just under 10 minutes. I want to pause and kind of scan the room and open the door for anyone to ask a question. Nothing's off limits. That said, we reserve the right not to answer your question. So anyone bold, don't be shy. Mr. Gordon in the back.
How come I knew it would be Rich? Good.
I was intrigued by a comment that came up earlier that sort of talked about the change in viewing behavior, sort of implying that maybe seasonality is less important than it may once have been, both in terms of business trend and in terms of the way that content is delivered. And I would wonder if the panel would react to that idea.
I mean, I'll jump in. I mean, I do think that this might be where you're going, but I think the way people are subscribing to content and consuming content is different now than it ever has been. Especially with apps and buy flows being more digital. The day before Game of Thrones, there's an influx. The day after Game of Thrones, there's a lot of cancellations. And our challenge now, more than ever, is to find ways to keep those people in the ecosystem longer, and to find those hooks to get them to subscribe. And I think that's the biggest thing that's changed in the last couple of years. Is just that you're constantly trying to sell people on being a subscriber. The churn is great, is insane.
Did you want to add something, Brian?
Did anybody stay for the lunch where the attorneys general spoke? One of them mentioned something about, I think, something about the context of 5 years ago, who would have thought of binge watching. But that was one that just hit me, knowing we were going to speak on a technology panel about that cloud storage dynamic that really became big for on-demand 5 years ago, totally changed the way a lot of people consume TV. And I don't think in terms of seasons anymore.
Right.
Other than when I go on demand and I'm trying to remember which season am I trying to catch up on, and it's labeled that way. So I think that may impact the seasonality concept of people can store it up, they can access it anytime they want, and it's not predicated on when someone was trying to feed it to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think when in doubt, if you prioritize the needs of the consumer, I think someone said something like that earlier, that's always a sound strategy. So there's no right or wrong answer to this, but I'm interested in your personal opinion. So if we go back in time, there were the HD wars. So who had the most HD channels? And then there was 3D, which everyone thought was going to be huge, but then kind of turned into nothing. Then we've got 4K, which has been a little slow out of the gate. Now we've got virtual reality. Do any of you, or maybe we could all just weigh in, any bets on what the next big thing is from a video consumption standpoint, from a experiential?
Well, having a dual English degree, I still think it's about content, that it doesn't matter. That if you have the best mousetrap, if you have billions, but like Westworld drives traffic because it's cool content, it's a great story. I think there's something to be said that people are learning from YouTube about content, about making things shorter. That everything's still even Netflix, who doesn't have to do anything when it comes to time, still adheres to, there's a half-hour show, there's an hour-long show. They're starting to get into some programming that's like 17 minutes. But I think that's going to be one of the next things, is just starting to change with the lengths. But it still just has to be good content. How it's delivered, that's what I think is always really fascinating, is that consumers are going to chase the good content no matter where it is.
Yep. Jeff?
I would go back to something Mark touched on again earlier about discovery. I think we were talking about the voice remote and how people may not discover and stumble upon things. So I think there's going to be room for someone to create algorithms that push programming to me that are much, much deeper than, oh, you like movies by this director. I may not like movies by that director. I may like it because good overcomes evil. And how do they find those types of truly emotional fulfillment that I'm looking for in my viewing, as opposed to just some random dynamic or marker like an actor or actress in it?
And I actually, agree with Brian a lot. It's let creatives create in whatever medium that is. People are going to pivot into and out of it. So it doesn't, in my opinion, like VR or it's that's just the medium. It's content is king.
It's no fun when you guys all agree. Disagree.
I think Chris is full of crap.
I disagree with you.
Just trying to help you guys.
Get new socks.
I think in terms of your question, Trevor, for me, it's basically traveling light, convenience, being able to do things with less, whether it's cords, whether it's equipment. Like VR, I kind of get it, but I don't get it. I don't want to put something around my head, especially in New York City when I don't know where I'm going or what people are doing behind me. But in terms of just, I think it's really about the content, and I really do think that, what I hear all the time is the edgy going to push the edge or the pushing the boundaries of content. You hear that a lot, but what does that equate to? I mean, that's like more violence and more sex, which I can't really watch with my kids, and I probably shouldn't be consuming it anyway. So, finding like family entertainment or wholesome content for us is a vital part of our sort of nucleus family. I think it's so important that we enjoy it together and creates bond between the family members. And as many of you know, back in the days, we actually had that, right, in a living room. We sat down, we were excited to watch something together, and it created real bonding time with kids or your parents. And I may be, one of the few ones that have that hope in the future, but I think, obviously Disney, in some aspect, HBO does a great job at it. We're doing the same thing, and hopefully you'll connect. But hopefully, that's where I see the content really maximizing and bringing real value to the living room.
Got it. So we got a couple minutes left. I want to pause and scan the room one last time, see if anyone's got a question. Great. All right.
Recently read an article probably know what I'm referencing, with respect to HBO sort of, I'll say, growing up to become Netflix. Do you have a point of view on that?
I'll go back to the second point, which was don't say anything to get in trouble. So, no, I mean, it's just the evolution, right? So we have to, continue to, invest in content, and when you have, other companies spending billions and billions and billions of dollars on content, it gets more expensive, and we just need to, continue to invest in good content. And I think it's doing more of what we've been able to do in the past, just at greater scale. And that's really kind of all I think the intent is to say, okay, what does this future look like? We're battling for eyeballs with new competitors, and we need to invest to be able to do that.
Great. Question, yeah.
We know that a lot of the younger generation doesn't watch a lot of TV. Is there ways to use technology to help, kind of get them in the loop?
I would argue, at least my focus groups of the 13-year-olds who come over and eat my food, they watch a lot of content. I mean, a ton. I think again, that's why I think it comes back to content, about if they find things that are interesting. And even the idea that they're not watching on the big screen, it's just because I kick them out of the living room. That, I don't want to watch this YouTube thing, so get out. And then they're watching on screen. I think it's all to do with what the content is and where they can watch it on the best screen possible. I don't know if there's different opinions, but that's what I see at that age. That
I mean, I agree. They are watching content. That's just not traditionally where you watch content. I mean, even Facebook and Instagram just announced, and they're starting to do longer programming. So on the social media, there's a ton of content you watch, whether it's just a picture or just people, what they're interested in. Just, I think the consumption is more there, but not the traditional sense.
I think we just, as an industry, we're getting there, and we're getting there quickly, but there's lots of business and contractual and all types of issues, but we just need to get more device and location agnostic, because they're consuming it. It's just not always on a big screen in the living room.
All right, so we'll do one last rapid fire speed round question. I promise no one's going to judge you based on your answer, but you got to be honest. I'm interested in what show you're currently watching, your favorite show, and what device you're watching it on.
Okay. Succession. Mostly the TV, unless I'm sitting in the parking lot outside of a theater.
Then it'd be a smartphone.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm old, so I forget a lot of stuff, so I'm watching Downton Abbey on demand for the third time.
Chris?
Honestly, I'm having a life issue that my kids aren't going to bed. So they're not going to bed till like 10:30 at night, and then it's too late for me to start anything. So I literally haven't watched anything other than kind of sports or anything that my kids can watch. So, but I am trying to catch up on Succession on my iPad when they're not looking.
The Indiana sports scene is pretty sad these days.
It had to go there.
Just an observation from a New Englander. All
You know
right.
what? I'm a Red Sox fan, so I'm
All
good.
right, good man.
Good.
How about you, Mark?
The staircase and Making a Murderer. I mean, that is just, it's just. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's definitely addictive and
Staircase is
intriguing
fun.
on Netflix.
And what are you watching it on? A TV?
On a TV, yeah.
And if you're watching Netflix, how are you getting Netflix on the TV?
Apple TV right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
What about you?
Yeah, what do you watch?
So I'm the video product guy. I watch so little TV. So, and I'm actually kind of like Chris, which is by the time I get the kids to bed and the dog to not be jumping on the couch, I'm turning on a baseball game and watching a few innings, and then I'm going to bed for the most part. But I am catching up on Ray Donovan. Fantastic show. And Peaky Blinders on Netflix is fantastic as well. A little dark, but it's good. All right, so we're up against the clock. I just want to wrap by saying thank you to you guys. It's actually more work than you think being up here. Some of you traveled to be here. So I want to thank you for opening up your thoughts and minds. And I want to say thank you to the crowd here. These guys will stick around after and sign autographs or answer any questions, should you have any.
Can we give Jeff an award for best panelist, so he gets an award?
Yeah. NECTA.
That's right.
NECTA 2018 Marketing Panel MVP
Yeah, I
to
think
Jeff Abney.
Next year I'll have a whole new bio. Come back.
Good.
There you go. All right, thank you, everybody.
Good.